Hi, Deepti. It's really nice to have you here. Thank you for making time.
Not at all. So, Adi, like I said, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be on my first podcast.
Amazing. Great. So this is an episode of Unscripted Career with Deepti Krishna. Deepti had a long corporate career with Google for about 15 years, where she worked on digital marketing, on operations, so around vendor operations as well as HR operations, and then also a little bit of foray into staffing operations and recruitments. So a long career, a very fruitful career. And then now Deepti is the founder of a B2B fragrances company called Anami. I loved the concept when you spoke about it, Deepti. So I would love to know more about it as we talk. But firstly, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. More than happy to talk about Anami and everything else, Adi. Very excited to be here.
Perfect. So generally, I begin with helping our audience understand about what your corporate career looked like. Was Google your first job? How did it happen? And so on. So why don't you get us started on that?
For sure. And there's not going to be much to say here because, yes, Google was my first job. And in fact, it was my only employer, Satya, because I interned with Google right after my second year of BCom. And that's when you typically get hired for internships, right? So that was my first exposure to the corporate world or any work at all, if you will. And that internship converted to full time. And I just didn't really think twice about any other company. Although after the final year, I did, I think, have an offer from one other company through campus placements. Wasn't even a consideration, right? So Google it was, and Google's all it's been for the entire 15-year career. So yeah.
So, but within Google, there were quite a few smaller or like careers within, right? So starting from digital marketing to staffing, why don't you tell me a little more about like why and when those changes happened? Because
Yeah.
just like for folks outside Google, generally this internal mobility is not really as common across companies. Maybe some bigger companies have that, but
Yeah.
firstly, a lot of companies don't have that variety of roles within,
Correct.
or maybe people are very attached to the role that you were hired for. So,
Yes.
but the philosophy is quite different in Google. So, why don't you talk to me about what was that experience like?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think for us, this foundation started almost while I was interning itself, Satya, because while it was a 2 month internship, during that time, we were hired to do ads review. Okay. And I think right now, even Googlers may not know what it was because that's how old it is. But at that time, all the advertisements that had to go up on the Google page had to go through reviews, and it wasn't automated back then. So we just had to make sure it complied with all our policies in a nutshell. Right. So that was the core job. But I think through the internship, we were exposed to every other department that there was at that point in time in Hyderabad. And right then itself, it was made very clear to us that mobility is always an option. Right. So this just like there was AdSense, I remember back then, and there was multiple other departments that we were given exposure to, either by way of just introducing us to folks who worked in that particular team or having lunches with them or what we used to call shadow sessions where we could go sit down, watch what they do. So that was what the internship was, apart from the core job, of course. So I think right from the start, the foundation is very strong that you can always move, right? And unless and until it was, of course, a very technical kind of a role, like a software engineer, etc., it wasn't something that you needed to be qualified for in that sense, right? So I think for me, I've always valued Google for that, where they never put the degree first and said, here, it has to be this for you to fit into that. And we got interviewed when we were doing like BCom and BA, and pretty much it was open to everybody in college when they came, right? So that itself was a good foundation for me to know that, okay, it wasn't as specific and there was a lot of flexibility. That was the first thing. So I think when it converted from internship to full time, we were brought back into the same role. So my first role within Google continued to be what we did, which is reviewing ads and making it policy compliant and stuff like that. But I think post that is when we sort of slowly start understanding what all Google has to offer, right? You sort of know what are the different teams, how they come together. And I think as someone who's just starting off in their career, it's very hard to be very clear about this is what I'm good at and this is what I want to do, because there could be things that you don't know, right? Like let's say you don't know what you don't know, so you just can't be so sure to say, okay, this is my forte. Digital marketing is what I want to do. Could be, could not be. So I think my first few years were pretty much that. It was just a lot of exploration in one way. And the second was also a little bit of the, I don't want to call it the set career path, but I think there was an organic flow that Google had back then where they would graduate you from, okay, reviewing ads to now, okay, I think you can sort of handle clients directly by maybe taking up their emails or maybe helping them fix their advertising account, right? So it was a very gradual, organic, natural progression. So sort of aligned with that for a while and went with the flow. And after a point is when you start to think that, okay, you know what, now is where I think I can take a plunge to start doing something different, because a few years into your career, you start to realize what you're good at. And I think for me, more importantly, Swati, what I started to realize is what I didn't like as much, which to me has always helped. I think I've been more of an elimination kind of a person than being very sure of what I want to do, right? So, but being clear about what I don't want to do makes the choice a lot more easier sometimes, because it's just like, okay, I don't think this is for me. And that's sort of, I think, what got me to do my first pivotal shift, which is moving out of AdWords. Because at some point in time, I realized that sales and sort of, cracking deals wasn't quite giving me a high. It wasn't like making me feel, it was good. I mean, I had to be good at what I did. So I did it because of that. But it wasn't like some of my colleagues who I knew would just be very, very happy, joyful, gratified when they cracked a deal. And for me, it was just like, yeah, okay, I don't know. It feels a bit like maybe I would be happier organizing stuff. Maybe I would be happier bringing order to chaos. And that's what made me believe that operations is where I think my strength lied. And that's when the first shift happened, where I moved away from AdWords and I moved into what used to be called GCon back then. I think it's called GUp now, which was a team that supported all consumer products of Google outside of AdWords. So we were talking Pixel, we were talking Google Play, and all of those things, right? So I think that was the thinking behind the first move.
Got it. Okay. And then I'm guessing that, once you have experience in operations, then a lot of roles which are operations oriented kind of open up. So you move from one product to the other, or one side of the operations to another. And then staffing operations is also one of the operations teams. So potentially that's one of those things. I know that during your career, you also moved from Hyderabad to Singapore. So how did that shift happen, or like what did you do to make that happen?
So I think again that's another wonderful thing about Google. So I think while it's so well supports your professional career, there's so much room for you to grow personally as well, right? And I think this move to Singapore was a mix of both for me. I've always had this aspiration of wanting to experience life outside of India, what it's like. And I know that's something that Google made quite easy, in the sense if you were, it was all meritorious, and if you qualified and if you're good enough, there was literally nothing stopping you from thinking of a role abroad, right? So that's sort of one of the reasons why I did want to explore something outside of India. And when it came to why staffing, I just felt like over time you sort of start to understand Google so much, and you sort of start to realize all the hype around it, right? Like every time you talk to people, oh, it's the best employed in the world. What's it like to be there? It's my dream job to be into Google. And you're just like wondering, wow, I just want to know what it takes to run a company this big and something that's been applauded so much, right? And HR is at the heart of it. And a lot of things that we probably don't see are all decided in that team. So for me, I just wanted to figure out what that was like, how recruitment happens, how do you hire the best people in the world, what's the thinking that goes behind it. So it has always been a fascination, and I know there are like plenty of sub teams within it. So my aim was to at least try and get an entry into one of these and see how we could go from there. And that's how staffing operations happened, and the move to Singapore happened.
Amazing. And then you were in Singapore for five years plus, or
A little over, around 6 almost, yeah.
around 6 years. And that brought us to 2023. And
Mhm.
Jan 2023 was, I feel like, one of the most unlike Google times for a lot of us.
Was
So, do you want to talk about that time? Yeah.
was I mean, it's just so truly bittersweet. I know we use that a lot, Swati, but now when I look back for me, right, it was just like, and yeah, I think for the audience, just for context, right, Jan 17th is when Google made its first layoff announcement. Something that I don't know, as long-term Googler, somewhere everyone is hoping that that's not something Google will do, right? And of course, a lot of companies had done it and had started off on that route much before Google made that announcement. But I think I'm talking for a lot of long-time Googlers here. But there was this faith somewhere that, oh, no, no, Google won't do this. They'll figure out another way. So when it happened, it all seemed too real. It sort of was, I think it hit too close to home. And more importantly, the how, I think, bothered a lot of us because I think US was the first to go, and people just woke up to not having access. People just woke up, went to office, and figured they weren't being badged in, right? And I think just that and how it was done was a hard pill to swallow. And when all of this happened, I was part of a team within HR, which was responsible for a lot of the impacted operations, right? Like we were responsible for offer letters, we were responsible for compensation. And not only were we feeling the impact of this professionally, personally, but even professionally, all of a sudden, there was this whole thing of, okay, the announcement has gone out. Now figure out what kind of comms need to go out to people who've been impacted. How is their compensation being impacted? Do we need to send out any letters to them? So it was just a lot to process. All of a sudden, you wake up one morning, you hear this. So I think it was just too emotional. On one end, you get the business side of it. You sort of realize the logical aspect of why what happened. But I think just to accept that even a company like Google might have to do this, I think was a lot. So it was a hard time, I want to say, both professionally and personally, because what happened after the US announcement is that there was word out in the street that every other country is coming next, but we don't know when. Right. So that anticipation, that anxiety was a lot to manage personally. And I was leading a team of about 8 to 10 odd folks. So as a manager, there's a lot more you do than having to manage your own personal emotions, right? There's also the team, there are questions. You need to keep them upbeat, you need to keep them motivated because there's work to be done. And it's probably one of the most um, uh, unprecedented times at Google because a lot of the things we were being asked to do weren't things we'd heard of. We didn't know how to manage an announcement this big or how to react or what to say. People were writing in, our queues were being flooded with tickets of impacted folks, and we had to respond in. What do you say? Right? So yeah, it is just very such a mix of being able to show up and do what you're supposed to do, but at the same time also accept the fact that this was happening, right? And I think what happened a month later was probably more significant in my context. So I think because the reason I remember the date so well is exactly a month after Jan 17th was when the Singapore announcement happened on Feb 17th. And I found out that I was on the list of impacted folks. So that moment, even till date, I find it so hard to describe it in words because I don't know. I feel like the image is still so vivid in my head. I remember taking it was a late night call that I was on. It was a global team meeting that I was attending at about 11:20 Singapore time. And all of a sudden, I just noticed all my tabs are starting to refresh. on their own by themselves. And typically you think the internet's acting up, right? Like, what's going on? Why am I suddenly reloading? And I'm refreshing, and not for a minute is the announcement on my mind, because you're on a call and you're focusing on what's being discussed on that call. And then suddenly, the email that was sent to my personal email ID, I think probably 10 minutes back, and I wasn't checking because I was on the call, flashes on my screen, on my laptop screen. And that's when reality struck. I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize today was Singapore's day of announcement. And I don't know, just such mixed feelings. So yeah, and that's sort of how the Google journey ended. I still don't know if I would have wanted it to be handled differently, because I think some folks mentioned, oh, maybe a heads up would have helped. But sometimes I wonder, would a heads up have helped? Like, would I have wanted to know for a week that I was impacted and I'm still around trying to wrap up? Or was this better? Where I just ripped the band-aid off and it was done in 2 seconds. I'm not exaggerating. Everything was over. My inbox was gone. And all of a sudden it was all done. So I think I'm still trying to think how I feel about it, but a lot has happened since then, which we will talk about soon. But that's the impact the whole 2023 year of Google has had on me, in quite a very significant way, Sadhya. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of us, I know this weird term that suddenly came into our life called survivor's guilt, where we were like, hey, how were we any better than anybody else who got impacted? And it was very clear to everyone that it is not performance related. It is just like the whole teams in most cases that are being impacted and RIF. So the reduction in force is basically happening based on some Excel sheets and numbers that we are not really privy to. And maybe the human aspect of it is slightly in the background, right? So, but what happened hence is that a lot of us also started thinking about what does it mean for me, right? So I know that folks who got impacted in the first round did not have any choice and any, as you said, like any other way. But
Correct.
um, things did happen differently later on, right? Like in the teams now, sometimes these reorg changes get made and then a few roles get impacted. Those folks have a few weeks to months to find out other roles in other teams, because that was the first thing that people said, right? Like, hey, we have openings in other teams, and we have,
Yeah.
and as Google, we've already always spoken about like how our skills are transferable, and what the role requires is something that is coachable. So why
Right.
didn't you do that? And I think the good sense prevailed, and they started doing that later on. But uh, that thing of the not knowing is what hurts a lot. And the even during the time when you're re-interviewing for things, you know that a clock is ticking and you're under a lot of pressure. So what
Exactly.
did it feel like to, like, once you reconciled with, okay, this has happened, what has happened,
Yeah.
what did it feel like to have no inbox and no meetings and no, like, deadlines suddenly, and uh, with the package that you received, did it
Yeah.
at some point start feeling like, maybe, uh, a lot of us keep on talking about wanting to take a break. Did that ever come to mind that, maybe?
Yeah. Great question, Swati. And I think, if I were to be completely honest to your question about what did it feel like to not wake up to an inbox and emails the next day, I must admit it was very relieving. I was like, wow, what are you saying? In like a matter of seconds, you're telling me I don't have to respond to everything I was preparing for, because I'm the kind of person who goes to sleep with a checklist. Okay, so I'll be like, when I wake up in the morning, these are all the emails, these are all the responses. So I'll have an idea of what needs to happen. and suddenly that weight is lifted. And I'm just like, are you really seeing? So like I said, I will admit there was a bit of relief. And but the contrary emotion there was that after 15 years, you're telling me I'm no longer Googler just like that. How did that happen? Because whether you like it or not, when you've been with an employer for 15 years and an employer but admittedly I have pretty much been in love with, it's very hard to cut off that identity. It's really hard to now sort of be like, when people ask me what do you do, it was so easy earlier. I work for Google, and now I'm like, what is my answer going to be? Like, it felt like I had no identity without Google, right? So that was the hard part. But there was a lot of relief knowing I would have some time to not think about how to reply to that email, how to put out that fire, what do I respond to that question. So that was honestly really, really nice. But I want to say, as much as there've been so many days within Google, sorry, where I would have just been like, can I just not get a week without any of this? It's just getting too much. Like a week where no one pings me, no one asks for anything, right? So it really was something I was craving. But the minute I had it, like I said, there was a lot of relief and all of that. A few weeks in, the guilt would creep in again. You're just like, oh man, how can you just sit and not do anything? You're just being so unproductive. And, this was the time when I was still deciding between what I wanted to do next. So and I did decide to take my time. I wanted to be sure I didn't jump back in, because that was the most natural thing to do. It was the most comforting thing, because it's a space that you have known and you're just like, I'm just going to go back. But somehow there was a voice in me that said, maybe this was God sent. Maybe this is a silver lining. So take your time before jumping back. And having my husband around then also helped, because there was no pressure as such. So no one was really like, aren't you going to look for a role? Aren't you going to go back? And the fact that I was in Singapore on a visa meant that even from a legal standpoint, I only had about 3 months. If not, I had to be back home. So at that time, I think it was pretty clear that we're not going to look for another role and we will come back. So I had made peace with that, but it wasn't easy. There were several days where guilt would catch up with me, and there would be this feeling of, how can you just chill like this? How can you just relax? How can you not be looking for another role? Because it is not as if I had answers then. I think it was really, really hard. It was a period of a lot of confusion, all self-imposed. Okay, it was not external. It was not like I had people pushing me or asking me stuff, but it was just internally. I was very, very confused about what I need to do. If it's okay to not go back after a 15-year-long career, is that what I should be continuing to do? But somewhere I just felt like I needed to use this time to give something else a chance, versus just having to go back and doing something that I've done for 15 years. It felt a little predictable, if you will. So giving myself that time was the hardest. And I actually had to do something as much as I took a break and did half a year in Bali as well, Satya. And I know, again, and I do want to acknowledge that, like you mentioned earlier, I made a comment about coming from a place of privilege. This is also there, because I know circumstances could have been entirely different where I would not have had a choice, and going back to joining the corporate world might have been the only way to go. But thankfully, in my case, I think I did have that choice. I did have the time. I did have the luxury of being able to make a different decision. So I took 6 months off, spent it all in Bali, just trying to slow down, away from the familiar spaces that would otherwise bring in a lot of pressure, just trying to see if that made a difference. And I think that helped a lot, just being in a place where seeing people do things that are so different from what you're used to. Again, goes back to what you started off the podcast with, saying that you're used to a certain way, you think that's how life needs to be done. And all of a sudden, you have this perspective where you meet people who've been traveling for 2 years with no goal. Like, it's not like they have an agenda. They've just been traveling, and that's okay. It's because I think it's so hardwired into believing that you have to be productive, you have to do life a certain way. You can't travel randomly. You can't just take a break like this. And you see pretty much everyone around you doing that. If you feel like you're part of it. You feel like you're not abnormal. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. It's okay to take a break, sort of a thing, right? So I think that helped a lot in helping me calm down a little bit, taking my time, and also just convincing myself that it's okay to try something different. And while I know you might have recruiters reaching out, Bangalore hiring like crazy, which again was a huge temptation because I was now based out of Bangalore. So then it was just very tempting on days when I would feel panicky. I would be like, I'm just going to go back in. I'm sure I'll find it out. Right. So with all of that happening, I think this just helps give you perspective, calm you down, and say, take your time. And if not, have the confidence that with the 15-year Google backing, if there ever needs a time or if something excites you enough to go back, it's not completely out of the picture. And that's also something that you could pursue. But for now, give yourself a chance. So I think this is how that period went. Uh, to sum it up, just a lot of confusion, a lot of self talk, a lot of assurance from my partner who's been super supportive through this all because he's been through a similar journey as well. And I
I
think
was going to say that you at least had some level of precedent, and still it feels difficult and like, hey, it's not for me.
yeah,
I know we this podcast is not about Navneet,
of
but
course, but
uh,
it's an
speaking
important,
of Navneet had taken that plunge of, hey, let me see what following my passion looks like. And for people who don't know, Navneet Krishnan is an international sports broadcaster and commentator, and he does that for a lot of different sports, Major League Cricket and Kabaddi. So having seen that transition and that thing of like, okay, things do work out, that he also speaks about how the first 3 to 6 months were the toughest, where you expect calls to just start coming in, but it takes time, and once you put your kind of like action towards it. And I loved what he said, that I started talking about things on YouTube, and then from there things started picking up. So even after having seen that, it does feel difficult when like it comes to you personally, even though like it was as personal for Navneet as well in your life.
totally, 100%. So at the end, that's what I asked myself, saying, hey, I have an example right here, as close as you can get. But like you said, personally, you have these doubts. You're like, no, but I'm not like him. Like he's like that. So it worked out. But I'm not like this. So maybe this is the best for me. Right. But yeah, I think it just helped that he was around and there was always this reassurance that take your time, we'll figure it out. And I think the one more practical aspect I want to talk about here, Swati, is ever since Navneet decided to make that shift, we did start talking about the finances then itself. Right, and that's very important because I don't want to make it look like, oh, it's all this rosy picture where you just decide and you go after and things will work out. Because I'm definitely very practical when it comes to these things. I do think that knowing that the finances were in place did make this decision easy, because if not, that would have been an important criteria for me wanting to continue doing what I was doing, because at the end of the day it's practicality, right? You need to pay your bills, it's not going to pay itself.
I want to know what it meant, like when you say finances were in place, because I think that is another thing that a lot of younger folks want to understand, and
Right.
sometimes maybe don't take that so much into perspective
Yeah.
uh, in terms of what it means to have finances in place. So maybe a few minutes
Sure.
on that, Deepti.
Sure. So I think when we were discussing Navneet taking the plunge, so I think we were trying to figure out what were the things that we should be prepared for, right? Like, and of course, I was 100% sure that I wanted him to do what he did. It came with a few trade-offs. One of it was me relocating to Singapore, right? The second was us having to do long distance. And the third was making sure that at any point in time, we were financially prepared for not having one salary come in, because for these many years, we were used to both of us earning. And with his new career, we didn't know when things were going to pick up. And if they did, what was it going to look like? Is it going to be anywhere close to what we were earning at Google? And if not, what was it going to be? And of course, we had a lifestyle that we built for ourselves. And there were certain things that we knew we wanted to do no matter what. And whatever he was going to do couldn't come at the cost of that. So, what that meant is we actually engaged a financial advisor who sort of briefed us on what it takes on being disciplined about your investments, and how, even if it seems like something you don't need to do at the age of 24, 25, that was when we started thinking about it, and how it will pay off later. So I think for me, it was just that foresight about having to reach out to somebody, and more importantly, being disciplined about that monthly plan. So I think without questioning it, because I feel sometimes it's easy to get carried off and you can just be like, "Arey, it's okay, I have my entire life left. I'm just going to go do what I have to." But I think that was something that I want to credit to my upbringing and how things work. This is what it is. You have to make that happen. So I think we've been doing it even before we knew that one of us wanted to quit, or one of us would want to maybe have a period where we might not be earning anything, right? So I think that sort of was put on auto mode. Think of it like almost like how you have a loan and an EMI that keeps going, right? So it was as if it wasn't even part of our earnings and it had to go somewhere. So I feel like we reap the benefits of it during this time when we
Yeah.
decided to make our independent decisions. And that obviously helped as a cushion. And me being in Singapore also helped, because I think while it came at the cost of long distance, etc., I think my 6 years of being there and being with Google also helped make us financially secure, which I think, like I said, also helped me in staying with this decision longer of trying to see what I wanted to do versus jumping straight back in. So
I love it. I love it because that I know there's a lot of discussion that happens about FIRE these days, financial independence and early retirement. And I think that is something that that community really understands, especially in the last 2 years, that the retirement might happen by your choice, or it might almost be like the decision for was made for you.
yeah,
And this is like you're a great case study in this thing of like, hey, even though it didn't happen by choice at that time, but you had a choice where
yes,
you did not have to go scrambling for another offer and take up something which is not something that is aligned with your life path and so on, and
correct.
that give you time to kind of like rebalance yourself, physically, mentally, financially, and so on. And then Anami came. So please
Yes.
tell me about your fragrances
Yeah,
business.
totally. So I think just going back to the whole Bali episode, right? So I think that's when I truly started to question what is it that I'm passionate about? Because in all these years, I was just resigned to the fact that, the whole elimination thing that I spoke to you before, it was like I always knew what I didn't want to do, but never really gave anything a thought as to if I wanted to do something, what would it be? And one of the reasons I was so supportive when Navneet came and told me he wanted to be a sports broadcaster is the clarity just amazed me. So then I was like, wow, you're so sure about what you want to do? Go do it, because I don't think I can pinpoint something so clearly the way you are pinpointing it. So just go ahead and we'll make that happen. So now I felt like it was a little bit of time for self exploration too, and figure out what is it that I really want to do. And it's not like I didn't have interests in taste, but I've never really thought of it as something that I would pursue as a career, right? Like I've always had this fondness or fascination for teas. I've loved fragrances. It's something that I've always been like, the bottle itself is just everything's super pretty. So you want to just go and see how it's made and, what's the backstory, what are the notes. So those are the kind of things. And I've always been very fond of it, more from a hobby standpoint. But now that I was giving it serious thought, and that's where I think the Google experience helps. I just went like a whole project doc on it. So I guess I had this bunch of ideas, deep dived into each of those more from a feasibility standpoint, which ones would really work from a business angle versus ones which are more of a hobby sort of a thing, right? And one such thing, like I said, was fragrances. And I just started reading up more, finding out, being in India, what can you do with it? And that's when a whole lot of information opened up, which was so new to me, like being in India and having loved fragrances. I had never really known India was such a hot pot when it came to the raw materials that go into perfumery and how much of it gets exported as well. Right. So that really, really got me intrigued. So this I started digging deeper, and this one thing led to another, and we sort of ended up meeting with this perfumer who's based out of Kannauj, which is the perfume capital of India. And he happens to be an eighth generation perfumer. His family's been in this business for hundreds of years, and they're into, so if you know, just for context, Kannauj is a place where perfumes still get made the traditional way, with mud pots and bamboo pipes, with copper pots and bamboo pipes and firewood, and crazy demand worldwide for the kind of oil that comes out of this method of hydrodistillation. So visited Kannauj, met the perfumer, saw the distillery, and I was convinced that this is something I want to be associated with in one way or another. And also because if India has so much to offer to the world, then I think there needs to be a better way of taking it, not just to people outside, but I just feel even people within India, like just like how I was before I discovered what I did, people needed to know more. And just the thought of it really excited me. And it wasn't a feeling I'd had in a really long time about anything at all. So, it just got me very excited. The mere thought of being able to create signature scents, being able to get a brief from somebody or get to know, for example, Swati, what do you like? Tell me your personality. And to be able to create a scent that captures it just sounded very, very exciting to me. And yeah, so that was it. The one visit came back. And it's not as if orders started flowing immediately because the concept is new and people are also having to warm up to it, right? So, but then, yeah, the idea came from there and we sort of finalized it after our visit to Kannauj when we were convinced that there's more to this space and there's a lot that we could offer. And I knew for a fact that this is a concept or a product that I'm pretty sure I'm going to stick with for long because every order is fascinating, every order is new. So I knew this was something we could put our bets on. So yeah.
Awesome. I was listening to this podcast with Nitin Kamath. I don't know, Nikhil Kamath. I don't know if you've seen the latest one on cosmetics and how they speak
Yes.
about the whole fragrance business,
Yeah.
and how big it's becoming. So, great timing from that perspective as well. I feel like you should capitalize on it. I know there are so many of these fragrance brands that have cropped up in the D2C space, right? Where they speak about kind of duplicating international fragrances, right?
Right.
You go to them, say, hey, I want a perfume similar to Chanel number 5, and they'll make it for you.
Yeah.
But this whole thing of self-discovery, and I kind of want to connect it back to what you said, that what happened to you in Bali, right?
Yeah.
You were on that journey and you thought about it at that time that, hey, okay, it's like life has been happening to you and you've been making choices by elimination.
Yeah.
But that was the first time when you started thinking about, hey, but what do I want? So similarly, instead of I love that phrase of smell the roses from the book, The
Oh,
Little Princess. The Little
yes.
so that thing of actually trying to understand what am I all about? What are the fragrances that maybe tell my story a little bit? Maybe this is how my childhood smelled like. This is how this is, and scent has that very nice property of like almost transporting it back to a particular place, right? Sometimes you smell
Totally.
a
Yeah.
particular perfume and it reminds you of a person. My
Yes.
6-year-old daughter Deepti, she we were traveling to Maldives, and
Mhm.
the whole property of Ritz Carlton it smells like lavenders, and their all their toiletries have such a signature scent.
Yeah.
And we got some of that back. Like, thankfully, they sell some of that as well, so we got it back. Um, and then, like a year later, we were in Austria and Croatia, and in Croatia, there's a lot of lavender plantation. Now,
Yes.
a 6-year-old who smelled that those uh, lavender toiletries when she was 5,
Yeah.
when she smelled the lavender, and I asked her, "Do you like that smell?" She said, "It smells like Maldives."
Uh,
Just imagine how, like, how it has imprinted on her mind. And
totally.
then there she was able to taste lavender ice cream and so on. So a lot of these things are just, they become almost the story of your life, and it's able to transport you back. And what would you not give to
I
be
know.
able to get transported back to that, like, one summer holiday afternoon when you were sitting with your grandma, maybe getting your hair oiled, and just like with no worry in the world, and just
Yeah.
thinking about how beautiful things are around you. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just loved the concept when you told me about it when we met, and that's why I really
So
wanted to discuss it.
so beautiful. And I think you've sort of hit the nail right on the head there, Swati, where here more than the product, it's the experience of scent or the sense of smell that I want to talk about with Anami, which is why we're doing a lot more B2B, because that's where you can bring out a lot of these experiences. With B2C, it becomes more of a product. It's packaged, it's a perfume, you're giving it out. Whereas these stories come out with what we're trying to do with a lot of the B2B stuff, which is exactly creating signature scents, being able to make sure it transcends across, all of their stuff, be it the toiletries, be it the linen, or even events like, for example, weddings, and that was one of our first orders as Anami. And we created a wedding scent for a very dear friend, close friend of ours. And till date, that's their wedding scent. So every time they sniff it, it takes them back to their wedding. And for me,
Wow.
that's so much more special than the fact that whether it was a perfume, whether it was scent. For me, it's just like, wow, you have a wedding scent, and that's beautiful, right? Like, yes, pictures, that's more visual, but I think this is more as an experience, it's a feeling, and that's what we're trying to bring with Anami. So,
Wow, it's almost giving me goosebumps. Right? So I'm just thinking, another thought that came from there is, you remember how Johnson's baby products, those have such a beautiful fragrance, and I know they have sadly been through a lot of controversy and so on, but just that thing of, like, you really want to smell the baby,
exactly.
how much creepy it sounds, but you
Yeah,
really want to smell the baby because it takes you to a very happy time. I think
yeah,
all of our generation, pretty much, like, now these days, kids have a lot more choice, but most of our
yeah,
generation was literally raised on Johnson baby products, and
correct.
that still kind of maybe at some psychological level transports you back into your own childhood, and like our parents into their young adulthood when they were parents, like new parents. So I
Correct.
see that thing. So just think about being able to craft a fragrance for your baby, and
Yeah.
like that being how you maybe work with another baby care product brand, and then everything is that smell, and that kind of, like, you close your eyes and that brings you back to those days. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Totally. So yeah, so I think it was just the sense of smell that drew me to Anami, and I feel like there's so much more that can be done. So I feel like today the sense of sight is really picking up. Like, people are getting very visual, interior decor is like, in India we're upping our game so much with it. But I feel this is one very powerful sense that there's a lot of opportunity to also bring for customer experience as well,
Yeah.
right? Like, I've heard brands like, for example, there's Onitsuka Tiger in Japan, which I think has a signature scent, and pretty much any store you walk into, that's what you smell, right? So I'm just like, that's the kind of recall value we want to have, right? Like, people recognize it as the Mitsuka Tiger smell. Or let's take Google, for example. I feel visually, or even like some of the furniture and stuff, so we know for a fact that no matter which Google office you go to in the world, it's Google. The minute you step in, we'll be like, oh, that's Google. why can't we do that with smell, right? And it's so much more powerful because, like you said, it's one of those really really effective senses where there's no distraction. It directly reaches your memory, right? So I think that's the aim. So hoping we get there, but so far
Yeah.
it's been a wonderful change. And I feel like, from that time of confusion of what am I good at? Should I even be doing this? Am I even cut out for being an entrepreneur? Only when then Google all this while I just know HR and operations. What does it take to start a new brand, right? So all of these questions I didn't even know when they got answered. They haven't even been fully answered, but I think the fact that I'm enjoying the journey and how it's wherever it's taking me, I'm just glad with that progress. So I think so. Yeah.
It's so exciting, and I feel like today I'm just going to keep on thinking about all the use cases of Anami because that's how my mind works.
So,
I this so I saw one interview with a few people in lead roles and Netflix series, and many of them said that they have role specific fragrances
mhm.
that helps them get into the character,
Yeah.
so if because at any point in time these actors are working across different projects, so how do
Right.
you change from being like a pari to a
Yeah.
I don't know, like an Anushka to this and that?
Correct. Yeah.
That's literally what they use. They would put on that perfume, and it
Yeah.
brings all of those memories together into, okay, this now I'm Pari, and this
Yeah.
is how Pari acts, and this is how Pari enunciates, and this is how Pari does things, and what would Pari do? So
Yeah.
similar to that, and in that episode with Nikhil, people were also talking about like, okay, people are now, earlier people used to have like one signature scent, and now
Correct.
they are getting into that thing of, okay, what is my boss lady scent
Yes.
versus what is
Yeah.
my date night scent versus what's my like mom scent, almost, right? Like when I'm
Correct.
out with my kids, what do the kids remember me as? So it's just so beautiful what you're doing, and such an exciting space. They also spoke about gourmand fragrances. I don't
Yes.
know if you're already doing that, and
So,
how's the market for that?
yeah. Oh man, and it's just so true. And some of it I feel is just so innate, so that you don't pay attention to it till someone actually speaks of it that way. But the very simple, like the morning coffee or the incense that's lit at home, right? It becomes such an integral part that you miss it on days when it's not lit. It just feels like something's off. You need that to ground you, to calm you, to start your day. So whether or not it's you drinking the coffee, like for example at home, coffee needs to be made because that's the morning scent for me, right? You wake up to that. So, and the connection with emotions, the connection with this psychologically, and there are tons of studies on it. And I know some brands have made it very gimmicky these days, and this it's sort of made to look like you literally use spritz it and do whatever. But it's not wrong. There's just so much study on it, and it's very true. And I know it personally because I'm a big eucalyptus fan for having to ground. So anyone says yoga, for me, eucalyptus is the yoga scent, right? That's
Yeah.
how I look at it. For me, rose is more uplifting. Like if it's something which is like a happy or a joyous occasion, for me, it's the rose that makes you a bit more uplifted, whereas a eucalyptus will calm you down, or a sandalwood is a bit more divine. So you have these categorizations already in your head, and now when you see it in writing, it's just like, oh yeah, that's true. That's how it works. So yeah, so for me it's just very interesting, the connections that can be made. And like you said, the use cases, right? Like ever since we've started, they have been asks or queries which we didn't even plan for. So in fact, B2B was also not something we planned for. We were thinking B2C. B2B happened organically, and now within B2B, people are like, can you set a yoga studio? Someone saying, can you do something for my car? And I'm like, oh wow, this is like multiple ways that this could go. So I know that this is going to keep us very busy thinking, and at the same time, it also feels like um, we are utilizing. Like I don't think it's been used up to its full potential yet. Swati. Like I'm yet to meet a person who'd say, "Oh, this is a concept I already knew, and someone's doing it." Everyone's going to be like, "Oh, wow! I didn't even think we could do this. That's so interesting," and that's enough for me to know that there's work to do. So just yeah, keep holding on to that and moving along.
I love it. And for anyone who does a visual review of this, like, or sees this particular episode on video, they're going to see your expressions transform and the inner joy that came when you started talking about Anami. I love it so much in general, but especially for you, Dipti. I have heard so much about you because as an Googler for 11 years, obviously there were so many people who've crossed paths with you, and Navneet was always like a known entity in Google. So from that association as well, it's been so nice to finally get a chance to have this conversation with you, to have like that behind the scenes of how it went down. And I love how the whole transformation has happened. And there are so many things to learn from what we discussed. I'll tell the top three takeaways for me. One is that in general in life, know what you really want and what you really like irrespective of what life situation you are in right now, because that helps to back it. Have your finances in place, because then even if a choice is made for you, you will have the choice to like take it or leave it. And then finally, when you're doing something that you really like, even though you did not even know that that is an area of passion, maybe it was an area of passion at a personal level but not at a business level, but when you get into it, there's so much of joy, and I could literally see your face transform when you started talking about it. So just that thing of, if you have the first two sorted, then when you get into the position of third, the ramp up of the finances or like the orders and so on will not feel like, hey, what am I doing? What am I doing? You'll have that calm to like keep chugging along to get into a place where, you know, once it becomes like a profit making business. So thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of Googlers for sure will enjoy listening to this discussion and conversation, and and I hope like it reaches a lot more people.
Thank you. So well put. Thanks for the summary. Swati, I couldn't agree more. Pretty much everything I wanted to say. And thank you so much for having me. And it's been a wonderful first podcast for me. So thanks a lot.
Amazing. Thank you, Deepti.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.